most dangerous person in a room is rarely the one shouting. It is the one quietly observing, holding a hand of cards that no one else can see. When Dr. Evelyn Solis boarded Flight 902 from New York to London, she wasn't looking for a fight, she was looking for sleep. But when a senior flight attendant decided that a woman with Evelyn's complexion and casual attire didn't belong in seat 1A, a chain of events began that would dismantle a career and shake the foundations of Pan-Atlantic Airways. Humiliation is a bitter pill, but as the crew would soon discover, revenge is a dish best served at 30,000 feet, signed in ink by the majority shareholder. The rain at JFK International Airport was relentless, a gray curtain that turned the tarmac into a slick, shivering mirror of the dreary October sky. Inside Terminal 4, the air was thick with the scent of overpriced coffee and the palpable anxiety of delayed travelers. Dr. Evelyn Solis adjusted the strap of her leather weekender bag, her shoulders tight with a fatigue that went deeper than muscle. It had been a grueling week. The merger between her private equity firm, Solis and Kincaid, and the European logistics giant Bauer Group had finally closed at 4 a.m. that morning. She hadn't slept in 36 hours. She wasn't wearing her usual tailored Armani power suit or the Louboutins that clicked with terrifying authority on the marble floors of Manhattan skyscrapers. Today, Evelyn was dressed for survival. A pair of charcoal cashmere joggers, a simple white t-shirt, and an oversized beige cardigan that swallowed her petite frame. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore no makeup, revealing the dark circles that shadowed her deep brown eyes. To the casual observer, she looked like a tired student or perhaps a nanny traveling on her day off. To the seasoned eye, the platinum Patek Philippe watch on her wrist might have given her away, but she had tucked it discreetly under her sleeve. Final boarding call for Pan-Atlantic Airways, Flight 902 to London Heathrow. First and business class passengers only. The announcement crackled overhead. Evelyn exhaled, a long, slow breath, and joined the priority queue. The line was short, populated mostly by men in gray suits, talking loudly into their phones about Q4 projections and scalability. She kept her head down, clutching her boarding pass digital, on her phone and her passport. At the gate podium stood two agents. One was typing furiously, the other was scanning passes with a robotic efficiency. Evelyn stepped up. Passport and boarding pass, the agent mumbled without looking up. Evelyn held out her phone and the navy blue passport. The scanner beeped a satisfying green. The agent glanced up, her eyes flicking over Evelyn's attire for a fraction of a second, a micro-expression of confusion before handing the passport back. Seat 1A. Enjoy your flight. Thank you, Evelyn murmured, her voice raspy. She walked down the jet bridge, the sound of rain drumming harder against the aluminum tunnel. She just wanted a glass of champagne, a warm blanket, and 7 hours of silence. She had paid $12,000 for the privilege, though technically, as the owner of nearly 15% of the airline's stock through her various holding companies, she was essentially paying herself. Stepping onto the aircraft, she was greeted by the heavy, recycled air of the cabin and the smell of reheating meals. Standing at the door was the purser, a tall woman with blonde hair sprayed into a helmet of perfection and a name tag that read Tiffany. Tiffany Stewardess had been flying for Pan-Atlantic for 20 years. She considered the first-class cabin her personal living room, and she curated the guests with the critical eye of a nightclub bouncer. When she saw the man in the bespoke suit ahead of Evelyn, she beamed, her smile showing a perfect row of whitened teeth. "Welcome back, Mr. Henderson. Wonderful to see you again. Let me take your coat." Mr. Henderson moved past. Then, Tiffany's gaze landed on Evelyn. The smile didn't just fade. It evaporated, replaced by a look of pinched concern, the kind one might give to a stray dog that had wandered into a cathedral. She looked at Evelyn's joggers. She looked at the messy bun. She looked at the soft, unstructured bag. "Boarding pass?" Tiffany asked. Her tone was not welcoming. It was a challenge. Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. She had already scanned it at the gate. "I showed it to the agent." "I need to see it," Tiffany said, her hand extended, palm up, fingers wiggling impatiently. "Economy is to the right, through the galley." "I know where economy is," Evelyn said softly, unlocking her phone again. "I'm in 1A. Tiffany let out a short, sharp breath, a laugh that wasn't a laugh. She took the phone from Evelyn's hand, tilting it this way and that, as if checking for a watermark on a counterfeit bill. She stared at the screen. Solis, Evelyn. Seat 1A. First class. She swiped her thumb across the screen, checking to see if it was a screenshot. It wasn't. It was the live app. Tiffany handed the phone back, her jaw tight. She didn't offer to take Evelyn's coat. She didn't offer a pre-flight beverage. She simply pointed a manicured finger toward the nose of the plane. First seat on the left. Overhead bins are full, so you'll have to put that bag under the seat in front of you. Evelyn glanced at the overhead bins. They were all wide open and completely empty. The bins look empty, Evelyn noted, gesturing upward. They are reserved for crew equipment and larger carry-ons. Tiffany lied smoothly, turning her back to greet the next passenger, a white man in a polo shirt with a dazzling, "Good evening, sir. Welcome aboard." Evelyn felt the first prickle of heat on her neck. She was too tired to argue. "Pick your battles," she told herself. She walked to seat 1A, a spacious suite with sliding doors and a lie-flat bed. She lifted her leather bag, a vintage Hermes that cost more than Tiffany's car, and placed it into the overhead bin above her seat. She sat down, buckling her belt, and closed her eyes. Just sleep. Just sleep. But peace was not on the manifest tonight. 10 minutes passed. The first-class cabin filled up. There were 8 suites in total. Evelyn observed her fellow passengers through half-opened eyes. Across from her in 1K was a younger man, perhaps in his early 30s, wearing a hoodie and headphones, likely a tech entrepreneur or a producer. Behind her were older businessmen. Tiffany and a junior flight attendant, a nervous-looking brunette named Sarah, began the pre-flight service. Evelyn watched as Tiffany moved down the aisle with a tray of crystal flutes filled with amber champagne. Tiffany served 1K. She served the businessmen in row 2. She circled back and topped off Mr. Henderson's glass. She completely bypassed 1A. Evelyn waited. Maybe she was fetching a fresh bottle. But Tiffany returned to the galley, started chatting loudly with Sarah, and began snapping shut the overhead bins. Evelyn pressed the call button. A soft ding echoed. Tiffany peeked out from the galley curtains, her eyes narrowing when she saw the light above 1A. She took her time, finishing a conversation about her weekend plans in the Hamptons, before walking over. "Yes?" Tiffany asked, looming over Evelyn's seat. "No, madam. No, doctor. No, miss." "I'd love a glass of water, please," Evelyn said politely. "And perhaps a glass of champagne if you have it open." Tiffany sighed, a theatrical release of air through her nose. "We are about to push back. The bar is closed." "I see everyone else has a drink," Evelyn pointed out, her voice remaining level. "I was skipped." "I didn't skip you," Tiffany snapped, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "I assumed you were asleep, and quite frankly, we need to clear the cabin for departure. Put your seat upright." Evelyn looked at her seat. It was upright. "My seat is upright. And I wasn't asleep. You looked right at me." "Look, miss," Tiffany said, leaning in closer, invading Evelyn's personal space. "I don't know how you got an upgrade. Maybe you used miles or a buddy pass. But in this cabin, we expect a certain level of decorum. Do not ring that call bell again unless it is a medical emergency. Do you understand?" Evelyn felt a cold shock run through her. It had been years since anyone had spoken to her like this. In the boardrooms of London and Zurich, men twice her age feared her interruption. "I didn't use a buddy pass," Evelyn said, her voice hardening. "I bought a full fare ticket, and I expect the service that comes with it." Tiffany straightened up, a smirk playing on her lips. "We'll see about that." She spun on her heel and marched back to the galley. Evelyn saw her pick up the interphone, the one that connected to the cockpit. Evelyn pulled out her phone. She had a signal still. She opened her text messages and found a contact. Arthur Pendleton. Arthur was the CEO of Pan Atlantic Airways. They had attended Wharton together 20 years ago. They met for lunch once a quarter. "Evelyn, on flight 902 to LHR. Seat 1A, crew is interesting. Might need you to look into something when we land." She hesitated, then deleted the text. It felt petty. She was Evelyn Solis. She didn't need to tattle to the CEO over a rude flight attendant. She could handle this. She put the phone away. Moments later, the plane didn't push back. Instead, the engines whined down. The fasten seatbelt sign blinked off. The cockpit door opened. Out stepped Captain Brock. He was a man of significant girth, with a red face and silver hair, radiating an aura of annoyance. He wasn't wearing his hat, He looked like a man who just wanted to get home and was being delayed by a nuisance. Tiffany was whispering urgently to him in the galley, pointing a long red fingernail towards seat 1A. Brock nodded, his face setting into a scowl. He hitched up his trousers and walked into the cabin. The other passengers stopped their conversations. The tech guy in 1K pulled off his headphones. Captain Brock stopped at Evelyn's seat. He didn't introduce himself. "Ma'am, I need to see your boarding pass." Evelyn looked up at him. "Is there a problem, Captain?" "The flight leader informs me there's a discrepancy with the manifest," Brock said loudly. "We show seat 1A as empty in our final weight and balance check. You're not supposed to be here." "That's impossible," Evelyn said, reaching for her phone again. "I scanned in. The gate agent cleared me." "Systems glitch, probably," Brock said, waving a hand dismissively. "It happens, but if the manifest says the seat is empty, I can't take off with you in it. It's an FAA violation." "So check the system again," Evelyn said, displaying her digital pass on the screen. "Here." Evelyn Solis. 1A. Brock didn't even look at the phone. "Ma'am, digital passes can be faked. People do it all the time to sneak into. First. Now, I have a paying customer who actually holds this seat coming on board late, or this seat is dead. Either way, you need to grab your things." "Excuse me?" Evelyn unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. She was short, 5'2", standing toe-to-toe with the 6-foot captain, but she didn't shrink. "Are you accusing me of sneaking on board?" "I'm saying you're not on my list," Brock spat. "And you're causing a disturbance. My flight leader says you were aggressive with her when she asked for verification." "Aggressive?" Evelyn laughed, a dry, incredulous sound. "I asked for water. She says you threatened her job." Brock lied, or rather, repeated Tiffany's lie. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for abuse of crew members. Now, you have two choices. You can grab your bag and go back to economy. I believe we have a middle seat in row 42 open, or you can get off the plane. Those are your options." "I paid $12,000 for this seat," Evelyn stated, her voice icy. "I am not moving to row 42. "Then you're getting off," Brock said. "Tiffany, call the gate agent. Tell them we are removing a passenger." "Wait a minute," the man in 1K spoke up. He stood up. He was tall, wearing a hoodie that read Silicon Valley in faded letters. "Captain, she's been sitting there quietly. She hasn't done anything. Your flight attendant has been rude to her since she walked on." "Sir, sit down," Brock snapped. "This doesn't concern you, unless you want to join her." The young man held up his hands, looking at Evelyn with an apologetic grimace. "This is crazy," he muttered, but he sat back down. Evelyn looked at Tiffany. The flight attendant was standing in the galley entrance, arms crossed, a look of triumphant malice on her face. She had won. She had exerted her power over the imposter. Evelyn looked at Brock. "You are making a mistake, Captain. A very expensive mistake." "Is that a threat?" Brock stepped closer, puffing out his chest. "Because threatening a pilot is a federal offense. I can have the marshals waiting for you." Evelyn realized then that logic would not work here. Power dynamics had shifted. They saw a woman in sweatpants. They saw a target. If she refused to leave, they would drag her off in handcuffs. That video would leak. It would damage her firm's reputation. Solis and Kincaid partner arrested on plane. The headlines would be disastrous. She had to play the long game. "Fine," Evelyn said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. "I will deplane. But I want it noted that I am being removed involuntarily, despite holding a valid ticket." "Just get your bag," Brock grunted. Evelyn reached up and took her Hermes bag from the bin. She slung it over her shoulder. She looked Brock in the eye. "Name?" she asked. "Captain Robert Brock," he sneered. "Spell it right in your complaint letter to customer service. They usually toss them in the trash, but you can try." "And you are Tiffany Stewardess," Evelyn said, looking at the stewardess. "Employee number 4920, Tiffany mocked. "Bye-bye now." The walk off the plane was a gauntlet of humiliation. Evelyn had to walk back up the aisle, past the businessmen who averted their eyes, past the young tech entrepreneur who looked furious on her behalf but helpless. As she reached the aircraft door, Tiffany leaned in, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Maybe next time try Spirit Airlines, honey. It's more your speed." Evelyn paused. She didn't shout, she didn't curse. She simply smiled a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a smile that was sharp enough to cut glass. "There won't be a next time for you, Tiffany," Evelyn whispered. She stepped onto the jet bridge. The cold, damp air hit her face. The door of the aircraft slammed shut behind her with a definitive thud. She walked back up the ramp to the gate. The agents looked confused. "Did you forget something, ma'am?" The agent who had scanned her asked. "No," Evelyn said. "The captain removed me. He said I wasn't on the manifest." The agent frowned. She typed into her keyboard. "That's insane. You're right here. Checked in. Validated. You're the highest status passenger on the flight. Wait." The agent's eyes widened as she looked at a specific code on the screen. VIP CL1, shareholder priority. "Oh my God," the agent breathed. Did they know who you are?" "Clearly not," Evelyn said. She set her bag down on the counter. "I need you to do two things for me. First, do not rebook me. I'm not going to London tonight." "Okay," the agent said, her hands trembling slightly. "Second," Evelyn continued, pulling out her phone and finally dialing the number she had hesitated to call earlier. "I need you to print the full crew manifest for Flight 902. Names, employee numbers, and their union rep contacts." I can't technically give you that," the agent stammered. "You can," Evelyn said, holding up her phone screen. It showed an incoming video call connecting. The face on the screen was Arthur Pendleton, CEO of Pan Atlantic Airways. He was in his kitchen, wearing a robe, holding a glass of red wine. "Evelyn?" Arthur's voice boomed from the speaker. "I thought you were in the air. Why are you calling me? Everything okay?" The gate agent froze. She recognized the face. Every employee knew Arthur Pendleton. "Arthur," Evelyn said, her voice smooth as silk. "We have a problem. I've just been kicked off your flagship flight to London by a Captain Brock and a purser named Tiffany. They told me I didn't belong in first class. Captain Brock threatened me with federal marshals." Arthur's face on the screen went pale. "He did what?" "I'm standing at the gate," Evelyn said. "Your agent here, what is your name, dear?" "Sarah." No, wait, Julie?" "Julie," the agent squeaked. "Julie confirms I have a valid ticket. But the plane is pushing back." Arthur set his wine glass down. The jovial friend was gone. The CEO was present. "Julie, is this true?" "Yes, Mr. Pendleton," Julie said, leaning toward the phone. She was boarded and scanned. The captain offloaded her, claiming a manifest error, but the system shows everything is green. "Stop that plane," Arthur commanded. "Sir?" Julie asked. "Call the tower. Call operations. Tell them to ground Flight 902 immediately. Do not let that plane take off. I am driving to the airport now." "Evelyn, stay there. I'm 20 minutes away." "I'm not going anywhere, Arthur," Evelyn said. "But I think we need a full review of your hiring standards." "Heads will roll, Evelyn, I promise you. Heads will roll." Arthur ended the call. Evelyn looked at Julie. "You heard the man. Stop the plane." Julie grabbed her radio. Her voice was shaking, but filled with a sudden, terrified authority. "Ops, this is Gate B12. We have a code red situation regarding Flight 902. CEO directive. Abort pushback. Repeat, abort pushback. Return the aircraft to the gate immediately." Out on the tarmac, the massive Boeing 777 had just begun to move, the tug pushing it back. Suddenly, the tug stopped. The brakes hissed. Inside the plane, Captain Brock was just settling into his seat, adjusting his headset. "Tower, Pan Atlantic 902, ready for taxi," Brock said. "Negative, Pan Atlantic 902. The air traffic controller's voice crackled back. "Ground stop order received. You are ordered to return to the gate immediately." "Say again?" Brock bristled. "We are on schedule." "What's the problem?" "Company order, Captain. Highest priority. Return to gate B12. Law enforcement and management are en route." Brock looked at his co-pilot, a young man named Davis. Davis looked pale. "What the hell is going on?" Brock growled. "Did we leave a bag?" "Maybe it's the woman," Davis whispered. "The one you kicked off." "Her?" Brock laughed nervously. "She's nobody. Probably a stolen credit card. That's why the cops are coming." But as Brock turned the plane around, a sinking feeling began to form in his gut. He looked out the cockpit window. A cavalcade of black SUVs with flashing lights was tearing across the tarmac, heading straight for Gate B12. Karma had arrived, and it had brought a motorcade. The return to the gate was a funeral procession in reverse. The Boeing 777, a marvel of modern engineering capable of crossing oceans, was now nothing more than a giant metal canister of confusion creeping back toward the terminal at 5 miles per hour. Inside the cockpit, the silence was deafening. Captain Robert Brock stared straight ahead, his hands resting lightly on the yoke, though he had no control over the tug pulling them back. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic rhythm that contradicted his stoic exterior. He had flown through typhoons in the Pacific and mechanical failures over the Atlantic, but he had never felt a sense of dread quite like this. Maybe it's a security threat? First Officer Davis suggested again, his voice cracking. Maybe that woman was, on a list? If she was on a terror list, they would have tackled her at the checkpoint. Brock muttered, wiping a bead of sweat from his upper lip. This is something else. Operations said, management. That means suits. In the first-class cabin, the atmosphere was brittle. The passengers exchanged nervous glances. The young tech entrepreneur in 1K, whose name was Leo Vance, a name he kept low profile, had his phone out. He wasn't recording yet, but he was texting furiously. He had recognized the woman. He hadn't placed it immediately, but the moment she walked off, it hit him. He had seen her on the cover of Forbes 3 months ago. The silent architect of global equity. Tiffany Stewardess was pacing the galley. She was angry, not afraid. In her mind, the delay was the woman's fault. She probably made a scene at the gate, Tiffany thought. She probably screamed racism, and now they have to investigate. Typical. She slammed a cabinet shut, the noise startling the junior flight attendant. Sarah. Tiffany, what do we do? Sarah asked, wringing her hands. If the CEO is involved, relax, Sarah, Tiffany scoffed, checking her reflection in the metal coffee pot. Arthur Pendleton runs a global corporation. He doesn't care about one unruly passenger in sweatpants. We followed protocol. The captain made a command decision. We are untouchable. The aircraft shuddered as it came to a halt. The fasten seatbelt sign flickered off, but the chime sounded ominous, like a tolling bell. The jet bridge began to move. Through the porthole window in the aircraft door, Tiffany could see the accordion-like tunnel extending toward them. But behind the glass of the terminal, she saw something that made her blood run cold. It wasn't just the gate agents. It was a phalanx of men in dark suits. And in the center, wearing a trench coat over a tuxedo, he had clearly been pulled from a gala, was Arthur Pendleton. He looked furious. The aircraft door was disarmed. Tiffany took a deep breath, put on her best customer service smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes, and prepared to greet the ground staff. The door swung open. Tiffany opened her mouth to speak. Welcome to. Step aside, a deep voice commanded. It wasn't Arthur. It was the chief of security for JFK, a man named Henderson, no relation to the passenger. He stepped onto the plane, followed immediately by 2 Port Authority police officers. They didn't look at Tiffany. They looked past her, scanning the cabin. Then, Arthur Pendleton stepped onto the plane. He didn't look at Tiffany either. He didn't look at the captain who had emerged from the cockpit. Arthur turned back to the jet bridge and extended a hand. After you, Evelyn, he said softly. Dr. Evelyn Solis stepped back onto the plane. She was still wearing her joggers. She was still holding her Hermes bag, but the fatigue in her posture was gone, replaced by a spine of steel. She walked past Tiffany without a glance, reclaiming the space as if she owned the rivets holding the floor together. Tiffany gasped. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The CEO wasn't here to arrest the woman. He was escorting her. Evelyn? Captain Brock stammered, stepping out of the cockpit. He looked at Arthur. Mr. Pendleton, sir. We had a manifest issue. This passenger. Quiet, Arthur said. The word wasn't shouted, but it carried the weight of a gavel strike. Not a word, Captain. Not until I say so. Arthur gestured for Evelyn to take her seat in 1A. She sat down, placing her bag on the floor. She crossed her legs and looked up at the assembly of people standing in the aisle. Now, Arthur said, turning to face the crew. The first-class passengers were watching with rapt attention. We are going to have a little meeting. Right here. Before this plane goes anywhere. Sir, we have a schedule, Brock tried to interject, his face turning a mottled red. The slot time. I don't care about the slot time, Robert, Arthur snapped. I care about the fact that 10 minutes ago, I received a call that my largest individual shareholder, the woman whose capital injection saved this airline from bankruptcy 6 months ago, was thrown off my plane like a stowaway. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the hum of the air recyclers. Tiffany's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes darted from Arthur to Evelyn. Shareholder? Saved the airline? The world tilted on its axis. The woman in the sweatpants wasn't a nanny. She was the boss's boss. Invest. Investor? Tiffany whispered. Evelyn looked at Tiffany. I own 14% of Pan Atlantic Airways, Tiffany. My firm, Solis and Kincaid, holds the debt on the very lease of this aircraft. Technically speaking, you are standing in my living room. Arthur nodded to the police officers. Officers, please stand by the galley. I want to make sure everyone stays for this conversation. He turned to the passengers. Ladies and gentlemen in first class, I apologize for this delay. You will all receive full refunds for your tickets and a significant travel voucher for your trouble. But I'm afraid we need to rectify a severe personnel failure before we can depart to London. No problem at all, the man in 1K, Leo, said, grinning. Please, take your time. Arthur turned his gaze to Tiffany. It was a look of profound disappointment. Tiffany, how long have you been with us? 20 years, sir, she squeaked. 20 years, Arthur repeated. Long enough to know the service standards. Long enough to know that we treat every passenger with dignity, regardless of what they are wearing. Tell me, why did you deny Dr. Solis service? I didn't, Tiffany lied, desperation clawing at her throat. I thought she was asleep. And then when I asked for her pass, she was aggressive. She threatened me. Evelyn didn't speak. She simply unlocked her phone and tapped the screen. A recording began to play. It was audio. I don't know how you got an upgrade. Maybe you used miles or a buddy pass, but in this cabin, we expect a certain level of decorum. Do not ring that call bell again unless it is a medical emergency. Tiffany's voice, clear as crystal, echoed through the cabin. Evelyn paused the recording. I started recording the moment you refused me water, Tiffany. It's a habit. In my line of work, documentation is everything. Tiffany's face went white. The lie had been exposed instantly. Arthur turned to Captain Brock. And you, Captain? You told me on the phone, or rather, you told my operations team, that there was a manifest error. That the seat showed empty. It did, Brock insisted, though he was sweating profusely. The iPad, it showed 1A as open. Show me, Arthur demanded, holding out his hand. Brock fumbled for his electronic flight bag, EFB, the iPad used by pilots. He brought up the manifest app. He tapped it. He stared at it. 1A. Solis, VIP, owner. It was there. It had always been there. I must have looked at the wrong flight leg, Brock stammered. It was an honest mistake, sir. The sun, the glare. An honest mistake is reading a number wrong, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. Throwing a passenger off a plane, threatening them with federal marshals, without triple-checking the system? That is not a mistake, Captain. That is negligence. And when that behavior is targeted specifically at a woman of color who you decided didn't look the part, it becomes something far uglier. Brock stiffened. Now hold on. I am not a racist. You just saw a woman in joggers and assumed she was trash, Evelyn interrupted. Her voice was calm, which made it all the more terrifying. You didn't ask for my name. You didn't check my ID. You took the word of your flight attendant because it confirmed your own bias. You looked at me, and you decided I was powerless. That was your mistake, Captain Brock. You bet your career on a stereotype, and you lost. The cabin was suffocating. The air felt heavy, charged with the static of judgment. For Tiffany and Brock, the first-class cabin, usually their domain of authority, had transformed into a courtroom where they were the accused, standing without counsel. Arthur Pendleton took a step back, allowing the weight of Evelyn's words to settle. He was a businessman, yes, but he was also a man who understood optics. He knew that if this story got out, if Evelyn Solis went to the press, Pan Atlantic stock would tank by morning. The Inclusive Skies marketing campaign they had just launched would become a national joke. He had to act, and he had to act with surgical precision. Tiffany Stewardess, Arthur said formally. Tiffany flinched. Yes, Mr. Pendleton? You violated 3 core articles of your employment contract. Failure to provide service, falsifying a report to the captain regarding passenger aggression, and gross insubordination to a VIP client. But beyond the contract, you broke the fundamental trust of this airline. Arthur reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a silver pen. He didn't write anything. He just held it, turning it over in his fingers. You judged Dr. Solis based on her appearance. You assumed that because she wasn't wearing a suit, she wasn't worth your respect. Let me tell you something about Dr. Solis. Last year, she built a clean water initiative in Kenya that serves 50,000 people. She sits on the board of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And she is the reason you received a paycheck last month. Tiffany looked down at her shoes. Tears were welling up in her eyes, tears of self-pity, not remorse. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I was just having a bad day. My back hurts, and we all have bad days," Evelyn said, cutting her off. "I've been up for 36 hours negotiating a merger that will protect 4,000 jobs in Germany. My feet are swollen. My head is pounding, and yet I managed to be polite to you. I said please and thank you. Civility is not a luxury, Tiffany. It is a requirement." Arthur nodded. "Badge, please." Tiffany looked up, startled. "Sir? Your crew badge. And your airport ID." Arthur held out his hand. You're firing me? Here? Now?" Tiffany gasped. "But the union. I have rights." "You are being relieved of duty immediately pending a formal termination hearing," Arthur said. "You are considered a liability to the safety and reputation of this flight. You cannot work this flight. Hand them over." Trembling, Tiffany unclipped her ID badge from her uniform. She placed it in Arthur's hand. It felt like handing over a piece of her soul. For 20 years, she had been Tiffany, first-class stewardess. Now, she was just a middle-aged woman standing in a plane she could no longer fly on. "Gather your personal belongings from the galley," Arthur ordered. "Officer, please escort Miss Stewardess to the terminal." Tiffany began to sob. She walked to the galley, grabbed her purse, and was marched off the plane. Passing the row of passengers who watched her with a mixture of pity and contempt, Arthur then turned his attention to Captain Brock. The pilot was trying to maintain a facade of dignity, standing tall, his jaw set. "Captain," Arthur said, "this is more complicated." "I am the pilot in command," Brock stated, trying to find his footing. "I have the final authority on who flies. I made a judgment call. You can't fire me for a safety decision." "It wasn't a safety decision, Robert," Arthur corrected. "It was a customer service failure masked as safety. You weaponized the FAA regulations to bully a passenger. You threatened federal law enforcement against a woman who was sitting quietly in her assigned seat." Arthur looked at the first officer, Davis, who was standing by the cockpit door, looking like he wanted to melt into the bulkhead. "Davis," Arthur said, "are you certified on the 777? "Yes, sir," Davis said instantly. "And is there a reserve captain available at JFK? "Captain Miller is on standby in the crew lounge, sir." "I saw him earlier," Davis answered, sensing the wind blowing and adjusting his sails accordingly. "Good," Arthur said. "Call crew scheduling. Tell them to activate Captain Miller immediately. Tell them Captain Brock has been deemed unfit to fly due to emotional instability and poor judgment." "Unfit?" Brock roared. "You can't do that. I have a perfect record." "You had a perfect record," Evelyn spoke up. She stood and walked over to Brock. She was so small compared to him, yet she loomed over him. "Captain, do you know what the Solis in Solis and Kincaid stands for? It stands for accountability. I don't invest in companies with rot at the top. And behavior like yours? It's rot." She looked him up and down. "You humiliated me. You tried to make me feel small to make yourself feel big. You failed." Arthur gestured to the door. "Captain Brock, you are relieved. Grab your flight bag. You will report to the chief pilot's office on Monday morning for a review board. Until then, you are grounded." Brock looked around the cabin. He looked at the passengers. He looked at Davis, who refused to make eye contact. He realized he had no allies here. The authority he had clung to was gone, stripped away by the man who signed his checks and the woman who owned the checks. With a grunt of disgust, Brock stormed into the cockpit, grabbed his heavy leather flight bag, and pushed past Arthur. He didn't look at Evelyn. He marched off the plane, his footsteps heavy on the jet bridge, a king exiled from his own castle. With the antagonists removed, a strange vacuum of silence filled the cabin. It was the calm after a violent storm. Arthur Pendleton exhaled, his shoulders slumping slightly. He looked at Evelyn. "I am profoundly sorry, Evelyn. This is not who we are." "It is who you are, Arthur," Evelyn said gently but firmly. "It's not who you want to be, but today it is who you are. Your culture allowed Tiffany to feel comfortable treating people that way. Your culture allowed Brock to think he was a god. We will fix it," Arthur promised. "I'll overhaul the training. Diversity protocols, bias checks, I'll bring you in to consult on it." "You will," Evelyn agreed. "And it's going to cost you. Name the price. I want the entire crew of this flight, the ones who stayed, the ones who didn't speak up but didn't participate, to undergo retraining." But more importantly, Evelyn turned to the young flight attendant, Sarah, who was cowering in the galley. "Sarah, come here," Evelyn called out. Sarah walked forward, her hands shaking. "Yes, ma'am? I'm so sorry I didn't say anything. I was scared of Tiffany. She was my senior." "I know," Evelyn said, her voice softening. "Hierarchy is a difficult thing to challenge. But you are going to learn. Arthur, Sarah is going to be the acting purser for this flight." Sarah's eyes widened. "Me? But I've only been flying international for 6 months. You know the service protocols?" Evelyn asked. "Yes, ma'am." "You know how to treat people with respect?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then you are qualified," Evelyn said. "Arthur, approve the promotion." Field promotion. Arthur smiled, a genuine smile this time. "Done. Sarah, you're in charge. Get the rest of the crew organized. Captain Miller will be here in 10 minutes. Arthur turned back to Evelyn. "Are you sure you still want to fly? I can have the corporate jet prepped for you. You don't have to stay on this plane." Evelyn looked around the cabin. She looked at her seat, 1A. She looked at the other passengers. "No," Evelyn said. "I'm staying. I have a meeting in London, and I'm already late. Besides, I think the service is about to improve significantly." Arthur chuckled. He took her hand and squeezed it. "You are a force of nature, Evelyn Solis. I'll see you in London next week for the board meeting. I assume this incident will be on the agenda?" "Item number 1, Evelyn confirmed. Arthur waved to the passengers. "Enjoy your flight, everyone. Drinks are on the house, forever." He turned and walked off the plane. As the door closed again, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted entirely. The tension dissolved, replaced by a sense of camaraderie. Leo, the tech guy in 1K, leaned across the aisle. "That was the most intense thing I have ever seen. Can I just say, you are my hero." Evelyn smiled, a real, tired smile. "I just wanted a glass of water." "I think you're going to get a lot more than water," Leo laughed. Sarah, the newly appointed purser, appeared at Evelyn's side instantly. She was holding a silver tray. On it was a crystal glass of ice water with a slice of cucumber, a glass of Dom Perignon vintage champagne, and a warm, lavender-scented towel. "Dr. Solis," Sarah said, her voice steadying. "Thank you. Thank you for what you did." "Thank you, Sarah," Evelyn said, taking the champagne. "Now, let's get this bird in the air. I have a nap to catch." Captain Miller arrived 10 minutes later, a brisk, professional man who apologized profusely over the PA system without making excuses. The plane pushed back for the second time. As the engines roared to life and the massive aircraft accelerated down the runway, Evelyn watched the lights of New York blur into streaks of gold. She felt the G-force press her into the seat she had fought for, the seat she owned. She took a sip of champagne. It tasted like victory. But the story wasn't over. The plane had taken off, but the fallout on the ground was just beginning. And in the world of high-stakes business, enemies like Captain Brock and Tiffany Stewardess rarely disappeared quietly. They festered. Evelyn closed her eyes, finally drifting into the sleep she had been denied. She didn't know that while she slept, a video was being uploaded to the internet. Leo had recorded the entire confrontation with Arthur Pendleton. By the time Flight 902 landed in London, the world would know the name Evelyn Solis, and not everyone would be cheering. While Dr. Evelyn Solis slept 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, wrapped in a duvet that cost more than most people's monthly rent, a war was brewing on the ground. The modern world does not wait for airplanes to land. Information travels at the speed of light, while justice often travels at the speed of a bureaucrat. Captain Robert Brock and Tiffany Stewardess had not gone home. They had not reflected on their errors. Ego, when bruised, rarely seeks redemption. It seeks validation. They sat in a dimly lit bar in Terminal 4, the kind of place that smells of stale beer and desperation, located just outside the secure zone. Brock was on his third whiskey. Tiffany was furiously typing on her phone, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks, making her look like a tragic figure in a noir film. "It's wrongful termination," Brock grumbled, slamming his glass down. "I'm the captain. I have the right to remove anyone who threatens the safety of the flight. That woman, she was a threat. She was disrupting the crew." "She was," Tiffany agreed, her voice shrill. "She was staring at me, intimidating me. And Arthur? He just took her side because she's rich. It's class discrimination, Robert. That's what it is. We are the working class, and she's the elite. They stick together." Tiffany's phone buzzed. It was her union representative, a man named Gary who had saved her job twice before, once for sleeping in the crew bunk during service, and once for accidentally spilling hot coffee on a passenger who asked for too many refills. "Gary says we need to get ahead of the narrative," Tiffany said, reading the text. "He says if Arthur holds a press conference before we do, we're dead. We need to leak our side." "Who do we call?" Brock asked. Tiffany scrolled through her contacts. She stopped at a name: Mitch Reynolds. Mitch was a freelance journalist who sold stories to the bottom-feeder tabloids in the UK and New York. He didn't care about facts, he cared about clicks. She dialed. "Mitch? It's Tiffany. Pan Atlantic. Listen, I have a story. A big one. The CEO just kicked a senior captain and a purser off a flight to protect his mistress." She paused, letting the lie sink in. "Yes, you heard me. Mistress. Some billionaire woman. She was drunk, abusive, screaming racial slurs at me. Yes, at me. And when the captain tried to remove her, Arthur Pendleton showed up and fired us on the spot. We're victims, Mitch. It's a number Me Too thing. He used his power to silence us." Brock listened, his eyes widening. It was a monstrous lie. Evelyn hadn't been drunk. She hadn't been abusive. She certainly wasn't Arthur's mistress. But as the whiskey settled in his stomach, Brock nodded. It was a better story than the truth. The truth made him look like a bigot. This story made him a martyr. "We'll go on camera," Tiffany said into the phone. "Exclusive. Tonight. But we want 50,000. Each." She hung up, a twisted smile appearing on her face. "He's sending a crew. We're doing the interview in the parking lot. By the time that witch lands in London, the world will hate her." Meanwhile, in the Pan Atlantic corporate headquarters in Manhattan, the crisis room was living up to its name. Arthur Pendleton was not sleeping. He was pacing the length of a mahogany conference table, surrounded by his PR team, his legal counsel, and the head of investor relations. On the massive screens on the wall, a Twitter X trend was climbing the charts. Number Boycott Pan Atlantic was trending at number 4 globally. But it wasn't because of Tiffany's lie, not yet. It was because of Leo Vance. The young tech entrepreneur in Seat 1K had Wi-Fi, and he had uploaded the video. The video has 2 million views in an hour. Arthur, the PR director, a sharp woman named Elena, said. The comments are overwhelmingly on Evelyn's side. "Look at this." She pointed to the screen. At TravelFan99, did that pilot just threaten her with marshals for sitting in her own Seat? Number Pan Atlantic is trash. At Equity Watch, Dr. Evelyn Solis is a legend. The way she handled that Karen Stewardess is masterclass. Buy stock in Solis and Kincaid, dump Pan Atlantic. Arthur sighed, rubbing his temples. "So we're the villains." "Wait," the legal counsel interrupted. "We have a problem. A tabloid just tweeted a teaser. Exclusive. The dark secret of Flight 902. Pilot and stewardess claim wrongful termination after refusing to serve drunk billionaire mistress of CEO. The room went silent. Arthur stopped pacing. His face turned a dangerous shade of purple. They went to the press? With slander? They are trying to blackmail us, the lawyer said. If this narrative takes hold that she was drunk and your mistress, it muddies the water. People love to hate rich women. It could turn the tide. Arthur slammed his hand on the table. Get the legal team on the phone. I want cease and desist orders. I want defamation suits drafted. And get me the security footage from the gate. We need proof. She was sober. We need proof. She was polite. We can't get the footage released to the public without a subpoena. It takes time, Elena said. Arthur, by the time she lands, the press will be swarming Heathrow. It's going to be a circus. If Tiffany's story gets out first, Evelyn is walking into an ambush. Arthur looked at the flight tracker on the screen. Flight 902 was over the mid-Atlantic, cruising at 580 miles per hour. Evelyn was unreachable, asleep in her cocoon, flying straight into a hurricane of lies. Send a message to the cockpit, Arthur ordered. Alert Captain Miller. He needs to prepare Evelyn before they touch down. She needs to know she's being hunted. While Evelyn slept 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, a ground war erupted. In a dingy airport bar, Brock and Tiffany nursed cheap whiskey and bruised egos. Desperate to control the narrative before the billionaire landed, Tiffany dialed Mitch Reynolds, a bottom-feeding tabloid journalist. We have an exclusive, she hissed into her phone. The CEO fired us to protect his mistress. She was drunk, abusive, and screaming racial slurs. It was a monstrous lie, but Brock nodded along as he listened. It was better to be a martyr than a bigot. By the time they hung up, the headline was already being drafted. In Manhattan, the Pan-Atlantic crisis room was in meltdown. Arthur Pendleton paced as his PR team watched the smear campaign launch. Exclusive. Pilot fired for refusing to serve drunk billionaire mistress. It was trending instantly. They're blackmailing us, the legal counsel warned. People love to hate rich women. If this narrative sticks, the truth won't matter. Arthur slammed his hand on the table. Get the legal team. And warn the plane. Evelyn is flying into an ambush. High above the clouds, the cockpit printer churned out a grim warning. PR. Threat level 5. Smear campaign active. Advise VP. Captain Miller sighed, handing control to Davis. He went back to the cabin, where he found Evelyn awake, enjoying a breakfast served by a newly confident Sarah. When Miller crouched beside her to deliver the news that her accusers were painting her as an intoxicated adulteress, the cabin went silent. Leo in an okay? Gasped in disgust. Evelyn didn't flinch. She sipped her coffee, her expression unreadable. It's the thrashing of a dying animal, she said calmly. We have security ready to take you out a side exit, Miller offered. You don't have to see the press. Evelyn looked out the window. Hiding would look like guilt. It would look like weakness. No, she stated, turning to the captain. I don't do back doors. I entered through the front, and I will leave through the front. Let them come. Heathrow Terminal 3 was a circus. Flashbulbs erupted like lightning as Evelyn emerged from the jet bridge. She hadn't changed out of her joggers, but with oversized sunglasses and bold red lipstick, she looked untouchable. The questions were immediate and vicious. Dr. Solis. Were you drunk? Did you get a working mother fired to cover up an affair? Evelyn stopped dead in the walkway, forcing the scrum to halt. She lowered her glasses. A working mother? She asked, her voice cutting through the noise. I employ 4,000 people. I manage $2 billion. And yesterday, I was denied water because a woman decided my complexion made me unworthy of decency. She says you were abusive, a reporter shouted. She lied, Evelyn replied. And I have receipts. Behind her, Leo stepped up, holding his phone high. I have the video, he announced to the cameras. The full, unedited 10-minute clip is uploading now. The crew was monstrous. She was a saint. As the reporters scrambled to check their feeds, Evelyn delivered the final blow. As for the rumors about Mr. Pendleton, I am the majority shareholder of this airline. I don't sleep with the CEO, gentlemen. I employ him. The silence was deafening. The power dynamic had shifted instantly. Evelyn slid her sunglasses back on. Now, check the stock price. I have a board meeting to run. She walked through the parted sea of stunned reporters, the shutter click sounding like a standing ovation. 3 days later, the atmosphere in the Pan-Atlantic boardroom was glacial. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, swapping her joggers for a bespoke navy suit. When Brock and Tiffany entered, they looked small, stripped of their uniforms and their failed narrative. Their drunk mistress lie had collapsed instantly under the weight of Leo's viral video. Arthur didn't mince words about their blackmail attempt, but Evelyn silenced the room. She slid a folder across the glass table. a personal defamation lawsuit seeking $10 million. Tiffany gasped, pleading poverty. "I don't want your money," Evelyn said coldly. "I want the truth." She offered a settlement. The lawsuit disappears if they record a video apology admitting their lies and prejudice to be posted on the same platforms they used to slander her. When Brock hesitated, clinging to the shreds of his ego, Evelyn played her final card, a threat to unleash a forensic FAA audit on his entire flight history. Broken, they agreed. Evelyn's mercy came with a final twist, a lifetime ban from the airline. As the disgraced pair slunk away, Evelyn proposed a total overhaul of the company's training and dress code policies. Every hand in the boardroom raised in favor. 6 months later, Pan Atlantic Airways was voted Most Improved Airline by Traveler Weekly. Their new ad campaign featured a diverse range of passengers, some in suits, some in hoodies, some in hijabs, all sitting in first class with the slogan, "Excellence is an attitude, not an outfit." Sarah, the young flight attendant, was permanently promoted to flight service manager. She became the face of the new training program. Robert Brock retired to a small town in Florida, where he spent his days complaining to neighbors who slowly stopped inviting him over. Tiffany Stewardess tried to get a job at another airline, but the viral apology video popped up every time a recruiter Googled her name. She eventually found work at a call center, where she was required to follow a strict script and was recorded for quality assurance on every single call. As for Dr. Evelyn Solis, she continued to fly. She continued to wear sweatpants. She continued to buy companies. But every time she boarded a plane, she always checked the name tag of the crew. Not to intimidate them, but to remind herself that respect is a two-way street. She had taught the world a valuable lesson that day, at 30,000 feet. Never judge a book by its cover. And never, ever kick the owner out of her own house. There you have it, a story of arrogance, prejudice, and the ultimate karma. If you enjoyed watching the mighty fall and justice prevail, please hit that like button, it really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story about entitled people getting exactly what they deserve. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder to be kind, no matter who they're talking to. See you in the next one.